What made you realize transgenderism is a threat to lesbian feminist rights?
Actually, it was an incident in 2017 when the Women's Forum in the Socialist Party in Norway decided to uninvite Julia Bindel from a women's conference. She was invited to speak about prostitution and the Nordic model, but she was deemed transphobic and no-platformed by the LGBT people in the Socialist Party. So then I reacted by writing an article called something like freedom of expression, but not for everybody. And I started to read about how they are actually changing the language. And after that, I just, it was like these things that made me like what is happening? Why are they changing the language? Why do they call people who protest hateful? And well, but it was actually this incident with Julia Bindel. So it's like when it comes to freedom of expression, this was I have always embraced this. So when anything is threatening freedom of expression, it's something dangerous. You just know it. So it's the same as which is happening to J.K. Rowling and Maya Forstetter.
If men can call themselves women, then there is no separate category for women. And women vanish. I mean, as we're seeing, and men make demands that they be included in everything that used to be for women. And if there are no women, then of course there are no lesbians. When I first heard about these men who were claiming that they were lesbians, I was gobsmacked. I have a lot of sympathy for the young women who are being pressured by these men, because it's all about rape. It's not about rights, except men's rights and men's entitlement, of course. So it's this. I mean, it might be just a verbal thing. You might think it was just a verbal thing that the category of women now includes men. But of course it's not. It's a reality. It's on the ground. Men have simply got to be included. Women cannot be separate from men in any way, shape or form.
When I first came out in the mid-1970s, I did run into a male transsexual, as it was called. For a while I had some sympathy. But it didn't take me long to figure out that this was really messed up. I became convinced about the importance of maintaining female-only space, even though it wasn't that much of a threat at that point. But I didn't really want any encroachment by males. And I was also horrified about the idea of modifying your body to fit social norms or ideas of what men and women are supposed to be like. And so that saddened and disturbed me. At that time, though, it was a small phenomenon. Would not have ever imagined it would get to this extent. Lesbians themselves and women as a group had no interest in transitioning. It was all virtually non-existent because women were in the process of discovering how powerful we were and how we were changing the world, and we were excited, and there was no reason to change sex. Or try to change sex, because you can't do that. I did figure out early on it was a problem, and then of course there was a complete takeover of our communities, which I never would have expected. It did take me by surprise, and it is a manifestation of the backlash against feminism. And before I knew it, we couldn't meet together as lesbians anymore at the LGBT center. Women's bathroom was eliminated. We were forced to say pronouns at work in every progressive group I was in. TRAs try to get me fired from my job for asserting that women are oppressed as a sex on Facebook. And girls and young women were all of a sudden transitioning in record numbers. So, and then just 1 year ago, I was at a Green Party meeting, and a male in pink hair came up to me and announced he was a lesbian. So It is definitely a small thing, which you wouldn't necessarily right away figure out was a problem because of our tendency to be empathetic. And all of a sudden, like a cancer just grew and took over the whole thing and has encroached on our rights as women and as lesbians.
In my opinion, the legislation of the states is always going to be patriarchal because it's going to represent the interests of dominant culture and of men, even if there are some women who manage to get to write the laws. The fact that transgenderism had managed to reach the institutions and write laws so quickly and easily, for me is proof that it perfectly conforms to capitalist and patriarchal interests. In my case, I realized that they were a threat to feminism when suddenly we could no longer talk about menstruation and our bodies, and we lesbians were suddenly cis women with vulvaphilia and TERFs for simply saying that only women can be lesbians. The consequence is that the liberating potential of lesbian feminism is destroyed and lesbians simply become a sexual diversity.
I always felt that trans did not belong in a movement. I thought that they were propping up the gender norms which we were to destroy, as they were willing to devastate their body in order to conform. It was exactly the contrary of what lesbians were doing. I must say, I had to train myself with a lot of effort to work with them. I brainwashed myself through the pity I felt for them. I learned to use a pronoun they preferred, but I always felt that they should not be in our movement. However, I voiced this discomfort only with my friends and never publicly. Now I see that the inkling I had been totally confirmed. Why was so difficult to use the pronouns they claimed? Because it was a lie. At that moment, I thought it was a white lie and I should respect their feeling because they were very happy people. But now it is no longer questions of a few unhappy people. Now it is a powerful lobby of men full of envy and arrogance. Transgenderism undervalues the emotional unity that each human being is with and in her body. Transgender ideology adopts an idealistic, in a philosophical sense, point of view that dematerializes reality seen as a product of language and interpretation. Undeniably, the representation of the subject comes, but this does not mean that reality is only a product of individual thoughts and desire. There are material data, such as sex and being born of a woman and death, which are not imaginary. The value that is given to male or female genitals may undergo some changes with the changing of culture, though I would say that these cultural differences are not very significant because the underlying oppression of women is global. But sex is not a sign at birth. It is seen and recognized at birth. Lesbians are female by birth, women by class identification, and do not accept the normative gender of patriarchal culture. Our rebellion against genders and their norms does not prevent us from loving our body and that of other women. It does not push us to change the body, but society and culture. Going the other way around is very dangerous.